Hey everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Today's video is another food prep, meal planning type kind of a video. My spiel that I always give at the beginning that my regulars know they can skip past and anyone new can listen to if they so wish, is that, as I said, we're a family of 8, we live off-grid, so I only shop every 6 weeks. I find that the most cost-efficient way for us to stretch the food that we get and to make it last and to fit with our budget, less travel and all that sort of thing. Now, because I do that, I travel 3.5 to 4 hours away to do the shop, because that means that I can get everything in one go. I can go to Bunnings, which is our hardware store. I can go to Kmart, which is like, you know, kids' school stuff and clothing and anything else that needs to be done. And Aldi, Coles, Woolworths, all the grocery stores, fruit and veg that I have a really good relationship with, a butcher, Costco, anything and everything can be done all in one trip with that one cost of fuel and that one cost of trip. So I do that every 6 weeks. Sorry, I had to change location. Darryl just went to get water for the stock tank, so the pump's going, so I had to face away from it. What was I saying? So the grocery hauls, we used to go fortnightly locally, and then I just was spending too much money. It was just too hard to get everything we needed at a right price locally. So then we moved it to 4 weekly to go to Brisbane, and that worked for a little while. It was a really good way to, you know, get into the process of the longer grocery hauls, but then I managed to drag it out to 6 weeks, which saves us money in the long run. We spend less per week the longer we can drag it out, and part of that is just by eating differently because we don't have the stuff fresh. Part of that is just by using what we have appropriately and making do. Part of it is by buying more in bulk when it's seasonal, rather than, you know, like buying 3 boxes of something rather than just buying one, because I know it's going to be 6 weeks worth and things like that. So over time we've got to 6 weeks. I would like to try and get to 8, maybe 12, but we don't have the storage capacity for that yet, especially not in summer. But we might get there eventually, and that will just cut down the cost. It'll still bring the weekly costs down a little bit, but it's also going to cut down the cost. It costs us around about $120 for each shopping trip just in fuel. So if we were going less, then that would be less on top of the grocery bill as well. Also, it's time away from the house, and when I don't leave the house other than the 6 weekly grocery hauls, because there's just too much to get done, and if I leave, then it doesn't get done. So those 3 days that I go to do the groceries, then I lose those 3 days at home. I lose those 3 days of cooking, of prepping, of preserving, of gardening, of whatever else. So by going less means that I lose less time. So all that to say that today's video was another one of the food prep and hauls after a 6 week grocery haul. This is September's grocery haul, and this is about part 5, I think. So what I do, when I was talking about the fact that I do 6 weekly grocery hauls, everyone was really interested in how I make it work, how I make the food last, how I stretch it, and what we eat and things like that. So I try and do some what we eat in a week videos, but I haven't done any for a while. I actually have one in progress over the last week or so, so I'll get that out probably later in the week. And what I also do is these videos, and these are basically just the days in my kitchen after the 6 week grocery haul, which lasts for around about a fortnight. And what I've been doing is putting a couple of days into each video and just bringing you along, just pointing the camera at my bench and showing you how I'm working with the food that I've got to make sure that it lasts, to make sure that it's going to be eaten and not wasted, and how it's going to sit on my shelf or in my freezer, and then how I use it from that point too. So, like, you know, it's no good just freezing all your meat and then not knowing what to do with it. So part of it is showing what I do with how I freeze my meat, how I preserve my meat and fruit and veggies and all the rest of it, and then how I use it to cook as well. So this is about part 5. It's a couple of days from September, so we're in October now, so I'm a little bit behind on sharing these videos, but it is around about part 5. There's normally 7 to 10 parts of these videos, but it just depends on the month and what I manage to get really cheap and in bulk and things like that. So part 5, and come along and I'll see you at the end. So this day I started off by mixing up a couple of loaves of bread. It's something I try and do every few days, not necessarily loaves of bread, sometimes it's another bread product, but at the peak point of making food, having bread made every few days just makes it a little bit easier. It allows me to just serve eggs on toast or French toast or sandwiches or whatever when you know, everything's really busy and needs a lot of work. So having bread available is handy for that. We don't buy bread because we have nowhere to store it. So it would just go moldy if we left it out because it's too humid, and we don't have freezer space either. We do get bread in our monthly food bank hampers that we purchase. There's videos of those as well, and we try and freeze that bread, but normally it's in the middle of the month, so we've got room in the freezer to do it then. And we eat bread heavily for a few days after we get that, just to make sure we get through it. Otherwise it goes to the animals. So we don't purchase bread, we only make it. The twins also had issues when they were babies with the preservatives in bread. They reacted really badly to them, so we sort of got out of the habit of buying bread as well, unless it was expensive bakery bread, and we can't afford that. So we make all of our bread products, generally speaking. So I started this day mixing up just a double batch of my standard batard dough. I have a video about it. I'll try and remember to put a link, but I generally forget. I'm not very good at putting links in. And I will try and get it up on the website as soon as I can. I'm trying. So I mixed a double batch of the dough and put that aside to work on throughout the day. After that, I had some tomatoes to work on. These came in the hamper, so some of them have some really heavy marking on the skin or are imperfect. They have some scarring where they've stretched, and they're not perfect, so they weren't sold. So that's why, more than likely, why they were donated or sold cheaply to the people who organise the hamper. So they have some issues with them on the skins. It doesn't worry me. I did cut out some of the heavy roping scarring on them because it won't puree up as smoothly. So I did cut some of those sort of scarring marks off, but generally speaking, I just cut them up. So I just did my usual that I do with tomatoes when I really need to get something done with them so that they don't get wasted, and that is to cut them into chunks and roast them. So I have a couple of cast iron trays that I use. These are enameled cast iron trays. They're a Classica brand and they are awesome if anyone's looking for something like this. And then put the chunks of tomato and slices of onion into the tray so that they can all roast up slowly together. Now, the key to roasting tomatoes is not to push the heat too fast, or you have bits that are overcooked and you haven't cooked down and caramelized the juices enough. So you end up with black bits, but none of that caramelization of the juices in the bottom. So slow is good for these. I spray them with a little bit of oil and sprinkle over the smoked rosemary citrus salt that I have made as well before putting them into the hooded barbecue to cook away while I'm getting everything else done. This is a long process because it's done slow, couple of hours. It's good to have them shoved into the barbecue, and then I come back to them and check them intermittently. As I finish each task, I head back to the dough to give it a stretch and fold or a coil fold, building the strength of the dough. Being that this dough is for batards, I'm not always hands-on with my dough, but for this, it does need to be strengthened to hold its shape when it's cooking. So for a loaf, a free-form loaf, then you want to strengthen your dough so that it holds the shape of a loaf. Otherwise, it's just going to spread out and be a bit flat on your tray. And hey, it's still going to taste good, but it just won't look as pretty. So when I'm making batards or focaccias is another one, I tend to handle the dough quite regularly over the span of an afternoon. Depends on the temperature as to how long a period that is. For lunch, we're using up cabbages that needed to be used. So these came from the hamper as well. We bought some cabbages from the fruit and veg store and they went into the fridge when I bought them, but they were obviously really fresh. They came out of the cold room. The ones from the hamper, not saying they're not fresh, but they have traveled a distance to come to us in the trucks to the hamper and from the hamper to us and things like that. So they need to be used a little bit quicker than the ones that came from the fruit and veg store. So we need to get some of them used up. And so we're working on those. So I sliced up half of one and cooked it off. I added some chicken thighs that I cooked off the other day in the cabbage as well. I used some of the shelf-stable udon noodles. This is the first time I've used these and I was quite pleasantly surprised. I quite like them, so I will probably get these again. I will check the ingredients on a few different brands. This one does have quite a few numbers in it, mostly just stabilizers and stuff. It's not a big deal. There's no colors in them, so you know. But I really like the Jin Mai Lang ramen noodles that I've been buying because they have no numbers in them, so there might be an option for udon that doesn't. I'll have a look anyway. It doesn't really matter. It's just something that is worth checking when I decide which brand to buy quantities of, because I only bought a couple of packets of these to try them, but if I'm going to go ahead and buy half a dozen packets every 6 weeks, then you know, best choice is best. So I do like though that they're shelf stable, so it means that they were stored in a crate with all our pantry type food and they didn't have to be stored in the fridge. They've got a long use by date and things like that, which is why they have the stabilizers and stuff in them. So you know, there's a a toss up there as to you lose all your stabilizers and then they're no longer shelf stable, or you know, that kind of thing. So I will have a look at the different varieties just out of curiosity though. So the instructions on these was just to bring them up to a boil and they're ready. So stick them in the pot, bring the water to a boil, turn it off, and they're all good. So that's what I did. I added them to pot, brought the water up to a boil. Once it was at a boil, I pulled the noodles out. I mixed them through with the chicken and cabbage mix and added a quick sauce mix, just like a soy sauce, oyster sauce, rice wine vinegar, a little bit of sugar, garlic and salt, and then whisked that up together and then mixed that through the noodles and cabbage and served it up. Everyone wolfed this down. This was the day that Darryl wasn't, this is one of the days that Darryl and Surreal were at Comic-Con, I think. So I only had the smaller kids, the 5 smaller kids with me, and they ate the whole lot. So this whole dish that got made was eaten for lunch. So that's a really good sign that it's a good choice of a meal. And we tend to do pretty filling lunch meals in winter more than summer, but we do it most of the year. So it's nice to have something decent in the middle of the day there as well, because Darryl and I only really eat lunch and dinner. We don't generally have breakfast, so we generally have a decent meal in the middle of the day. I think this would be a really easy one to add into there. There was another coil fold of the bread between tasks and a clean down of the kitchen bench, which happens very regularly. So the bench gets cleaned and sanitized numerous times in a day between different tasks, especially if there's raw meat involved and things like that. I am trying to find myself a bench that can go on an L to the bench that I currently have, so that I can get some of the stuff off the surface of the bench, and then I'd have more room to do prep on. So if I could get a kick-out bench, I could move the drawer with all my spices and stuff and maybe the Thermomix and the KitchenAid off this bench, and then I'd have the whole bench to work on. So we're working on that. The next thing I did was make some banana bread. I had a bunch of bananas that were getting very brown, and whilst the kids keep eating them fresh quite a ways past this, they're not overly fussy, I really wanted to use some for banana bread. I do normally do choc chip banana bread, mind you, but I didn't have any chocolate chips. The kids had eaten the last of them out of the freezer. So I just did it plain, but it's tasty nonetheless. I make a very simple banana bread. I throw all the wet ingredients, including the bananas, into the Thermomix, and then I dry, mix, scrape down, and mix again, and then put it into a loaf tin. I do have a short on Instagram, I don't know if it's on YouTube, of how I make my banana bread, but again, it's something that I need to get up onto the website as well to go along with it. I used the cast iron loaf tins. They work really well for a single batch of the banana bread. When I have a whole lot of bananas to get through, I will use the Pullman loaf tins, because I'll do a double batch per tin. So I can get 4 batches of bananas, banana bread, which is sort of anywhere between 12 and 16 bananas, depending on the size of them, all done at once. And then I'll freeze portions of it, so they only eat half of one of them per day, sort of thing, and then you can have 3 half portions frozen, which works really well. But when I don't, I use the smaller tins. Now, I use the Kmart loaf tin liners, and I really like them. I have seen other brands on Amazon though that I might give a try, because I do have a few little irks about the way the Kmart ones fold, but they might all do that. But the main thing is that the Kmart ones come in 3 packs, 2 rounds and 1 loaf. So I bought 2 3-packs because I wanted 2 loaf tins, and I'd like more loaf tins, but I don't need any more rounds. So I don't really want to buy more 3-packs when I don't have to. So I might see if I can find some standalone loaf ones, and maybe Amazon will have some options that will work. Once the tomatoes were roasted, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with them. I just knew that they had to be done. So it was a busy day. I was actually filming a day in the life at the same time, so I just couldn't decide what I was going to do. So I put them into one of the 4-litre Kmart tubs, and they'll go in the fridge, and I'll figure it out tomorrow. I'll figure something out to do with them, but at least they're cooked and they're not going to go bad in the bottom of my fridge anymore. Worst comes to worst, they can be thrown in the freezer. Generally speaking, like in the middle of summer when I've got tomatoes on the plants, what I do is I do small batch canning of them. I roast them like this, and then I just shove it into jars, and then I steam can it. But I wasn't real keen on spending the time doing that with the hamper tomatoes versus, you know, the ones that I'm picking in the garden. We have a lot of eggs at the moment. The chooks are laying really well, and whilst I'm collecting some to hatch, we don't need huge amounts of extra hens this year. So I'm being selective in my hatching choices, which means that there's lots of eggs to eat. We do want some hens to replace any that are aging out, but we do have a fair few young ones at the moment, so we don't want too many because we'll just end up at a point where we get too many eggs and we just can't use them. So I decided to make a big batch of fried rice for dinner. It's super simple and you can add whatever you want to it. It's very versatile. You can serve whatever you want over the top of it as well. Like you can actually serve a meal over it as a, meal over rice, or you can just serve it on its own depending on what you put in it and things like that. So first thing I did was to scramble a whole lot of eggs. I think I did about 30 eggs. I whisked them all up and then cooked them off in batches to a soft scramble, and then cut them up, and I then cut up and cooked off a bunch of the chicken. So this is the chicken thighs that I marinated the other day, so we've been using them over a couple of days. This is why I like to leave them in the fridge for a couple of days as well. So we cook it all off and then it sits in the fridge for a couple of days before it gets frozen, and that means that over those couple of days I have the opportunity to use it in a variety of meals that to make things simple, and then it'll get portioned up and frozen afterwards. I cooked that off, mixed it through the rice. I had cooked earlier in the day, so I cooked the rice earlier in the day so that it could cool before I mixed it through. Added some tin corn, some sesame oil, soy sauce, ketchup mayonnaise, and anything else that the kids happen to want. Sometimes we put greens in it, sometimes we serve it meat over it rather than in it. It's super simple, but it's super tasty, and it's just versatile depending on what you have. Even just eggs, rice and soy sauce is enough for me. Like, I'm happy to just have a fried rice with egg in it, basically. It's really nice with bacon and stuff in it. We didn't have any bacon at the moment. I couldn't buy any bacon this month's shopping trip for any of the economy cheap stuff that I buy, and I haven't got my pork belly brined yet for our own bacon, so we didn't have any of that. After dinner was done and cleared away, I needed to split and shape the bread dough. So the batch I was making was for 2 loaves. So I roughly halve it and then pre-shape it. I got my colanders lined with the linen I'm using and then shaped it again for the colanders for an overnight rest in the fridge. The colanders I'm using are from a Japanese store. They work really well as a banneton for me because I don't like using cane bannetons because of the humidity around. So the plastic works really well. The linen I'm using in it is just a piece of linen that I have overlocked and put inside it, and it's just a good size, and I just use it, shake it and hang it, and I use semolina to stop it from sticking to the sides. We sliced up the banana bread for dessert. It is a bit of a no-fail recipe. It's pretty, I don't think I've ever had it not work. I even overcooked this batch a little bit and it was still moist and tasty. In summer, I tend to make this with a portion of the banana replaced with zucchini, which is really nice as well, and uses up some of those excessive zucchinis that you always end up with in summer. So it was just sliced up and everyone had a piece for dessert, and there was a piece left for everyone for the next day. The next morning I got the bread sorted, so I preheated my Wollsted Dutch oven bread bakers. Then I placed the loaves in there from the colanders and scored them. I just do a straight score down the middle, nothing fancy, and put them in the hooded barbecue. So I preheat the Wollsted bakers for about 20 minutes at top temperature before I put the bread into it, and then I put them into the barbecue and I turn it down while it's cooking. And then once I take the lid off, I turn it down a little bit further for the loaf to brown up. The next thing I started with some chicken stock with the carcasses and a few other bits and bobs from the Costco chickens. This definitely made a super tasty stock. You'll see it pop up a few times that I'll now use it and I'll can it and things like that in the next few days. So it worked out really well. I added some onion in nice big chunks so that they can be removed for the dog food, some carrots, some garlic, a bit of lemon juice, some bags that I had in the freezer of offcuts of mushroom stalks from when I canned the tops marinated for Darryl to use on pizzas. And then I added a couple of bags of the carcasses, probably about half, so about 4 or 5 carcasses worth, and a bag of the leg bones that we'd had from the glazed drumsticks, which always add a nice flavour as well. I added a bit of apple cider vinegar and some salt and filled it up. For anyone who hasn't seen me do this before, I do use a hose, as this is one of the water supplies that we have in the kitchen. It goes through a filter off the tank, and we use this hose to fill our Berkeys. This is our dishwater, our washing water, shower water, all that sort of thing. It's very nice to be able to do this rather than cart jugfuls from the sink or have to move a really heavy pot once it's full. So I appreciate having that hose to be used. One of the other things I needed to get done once that was in the pressure cooker was to make room in the freezer. It's all packed very full at the moment, and So, and to get some of that chicken thigh that I had grilled that needs to be sliced and vacuum sealed and put in the freezer, I need to reorganize things and move things around. So the chicken stock was one part of that, but the other thing was this, because I used the carcasses, so I pulled those bags of carcasses out of the freezer to make the chicken stock. But the other thing was this buttermilk chicken that I had flash freezing on trays. So I pulled it out and I transferred it from the trays into Ziploc bags for going back into the freezer. I don't know that it really changed the space it was taking up, but at the same time those trays only sit in one section. So I only have one spot that those trays can be flat and used for flash freezing. So if I have to put those bags could go elsewhere that wasn't necessarily a flat spot, and that tray could go back in where it was flat. So it let me use that tray again to flash freeze other things. So I got all the chicken bagged up for meals later in the month. That should be 3 or 4 meals worth. I'm still tracking how this works for us with the whole bulk chicken into the buttermilk and then used for meals later. I'm still assessing how much it makes and how much I want to have on hand, sort of thing. And how it stores, like whether we only want to do enough for the 6, maybe it should be vacuum sealed if it's going to be for a significant amount of time. I don't know. Anyway, I'm still assessing that. So I broke up the rest of the brown bananas onto the baking tray so that I could flash freeze them for smoothies and smoothie pops later on in the month as well. Now that it's getting hot, I need to start making big batches of the smoothie pops for the kids because they like to snack on them throughout the day. So having the frozen banana there means that I can use that as part of those smoothie pops. I just break them into chunks, nothing fancy, just smaller, blends easier in the Thermomix than giant pieces. The giant pieces will blend, but obviously it's just quicker and easier to have smaller pieces. Everything in smaller pieces works well. So I broke them all up, put them on the tray, put the tray into the freezer in the spot the chicken had been to let it flash freeze, and then it'll be, once it's frozen, I can stick it in bags later. But this way it's not going to stick to itself in a bag, so when I go to use it, it'll all be in individual pieces. We had the other half of the cabbage that I'd used for lunch the day before to use, and we're still trying to use up eggs. So I made a big batch of okonomiyaki, or the cabbage pancakes, for lunch. I did my normal. I shredded up half the cabbage nice and fine, mixed a bit of flour through the cabbage to coat it, and then I added the eggs. Now I used a dozen eggs today because we have a whole lot of eggs to use, and then I just adjusted the other quantities as needed. So then we're adding flour and water to that cabbage and eggs to make it into a batter, and then I just adjusted it as needed, like add a little bit of water or add a little bit more flour to make it into the batter consistency that I like. And I discussed this when we make it, when I've made it on I've got a whole video on okonomiyaki, that you want the batter to your preference. You either have a lot of batter with a bit of cabbage, or you have a lot of cabbage with a bit of batter. However you prefer to eat it, that's the consistency you want to make it. It's a very flexible recipe. So I added a little bit of soy sauce as well in there, and then the water and flour is needed to get it to the right texture. Once it was ready, I cooked it off in the cast iron pans, about 1/2 cup measures per pancake. I find that I like the speed that it cooks in the smaller pancakes rather than the larger ones, and it means that I can get the kids served quicker, like 1 each, quickly make 6, have 1 each, and then quickly make 6 and have a second each, that sort of thing, rather than trying to make the big ones where I can only fit 1 or 2 in a pan at a time. We served it like normal, with some grilled chicken in this case, because I still have those chicken thighs to use, a drizzle of ketchup mayonnaise, and some mayo. This is my plate, and I'm very generous with my mayo, but not everyone likes it with mayo. Traditionally, it's served with Kewpie, I believe, that sort of a savoury mayo. We use whatever mayo I happen to have. I do make Kewpie style mayo sometimes, but at the same time, I'm not overly fussed. And that's where I'll leave this part 5 off at. The next one will be a few days of canning the stock and using the stock and things like that. Just try and break them up into similar sized pieces of time to give you the videos that you have time to watch as well. We don't want it to drag out too long. And my rambling garden chat the other day dragged on well and truly long enough for everyone. So that was part 5 of September. I still got, I looked through my footage there, I've still got a couple of parts to go and a couple of individual videos as well that for things that were asked about that need to be done. And then we're going to be back at shopping again. We're going to be back at trying to plan for the next shopping trip. The hamper is due Saturday week, so it's not for another week and a bit, almost 2 weeks. So it'll be the week before I go shopping. So I will share that when we get that one as well. And anything else in between, and there's just going to be lots and lots of garden work, so I will be sharing that as I go. I know that a lot of people come here for the food, not necessarily for anything else, but everyone can just pick and choose what they want to watch. So thank you for joining me again today, and I will see you on the next video.